Good evening and welcome to this April 24th Committee of the Whole meeting of the Lake Bluff Village Board of Trustees. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Ankerman?
Here.
Trustee Markey?
Here.
Trustee Ryder?
Here.
President Charlo?
Here. Next on our agenda are the non-agenda items and visitor for public comments. The Committee of the Whole allocates 15 minutes during this item for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the Committee of the Whole on any matter not listed on the agenda. Each person addressing the Committee of the Whole is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. Do we have anybody online who would like to make a comment?
No one online.
Thank you. And proceeding on to the next item, that is our item number 4 for general business. Are there any changes to the agenda for tonight? Not that we can see.
Need a motion to consider? Okay.
Moving
I don't move.
Moving forward to item 4A, that would be the consideration of the minutes from the March 1st, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. A second.
Second.
All right. Do we have any changes to this agenda, to these minutes? Clerk, please call the roll.
That's a voice vote.
It's a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item on our agenda is the item 4B, that would be the informational update from the Lake Bluff Open Land Association. Thank you, Ben.
Aye.
Hello. Evening all, I'll introduce myself. Ben Miller, President, Lake Bluff Open Lands.
Michelle Moragic.
Our Natural Areas Coordinator, and thank you to Sue Ramore for showing up in support. I was asked, part of our agreement with our memorandum of understanding for the various village properties that we steward is to give a report on what we've done over the past year and give you a glimpse into what we're looking at focusing on for the subsequent year. So that's why we're here tonight, and thank you for having us. Next slide, please. This is a brief summary of our work in 2022. You can see it's quite extensive and relegated only to village properties for the most part. The Ravine Preserve is kind of a joint venture there, so we included it just for pattern numbers, let's put it that way. In total, we're looking at about 1,500 hours between volunteer and staff spent on village property over the course of the 2022 fiscal year. The majority of which was located at the Skokie River and Water Reserve, located adjacent to Mariani Landscape. That is the property that runs contiguous with Oriole Grove, and then Lake Forest Open Lands, Skokie Reserve as well. The Ravine Preserve, located next to Evanston, right? Entrance off of Evanston? Yeah. Rockland Wetlands and 176, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth in a minute, but basically the entire 176 corridor, terminating right behind the pool, and the Bike Path Prairie on the other side of 176, one of our other charges. Next slide, please. Very briefly, the Skokie River and Water Preserve, what we've accomplished over 22 is recruited a group of feisty young elementary schoolers called Nature Savers, who are redoing all of our bluebird boxes over there. Thank you to them, Handley and Eric Fisher, thank you. They're supervising parents. In addition, we had some trail expansion courtesy of Mariani Landscaping. Thank you, them. And then actually most of this occurred in 23 over the past 2 months, so I included it in here because it's kind of exciting. We were awarded an IDNR grant in 22. Next slide, please. Let's just go on there.
Before you, Ben, if you could, just so bluebird boxes means what exactly?
So we have boxes throughout the preserve as bluebird habitat. They had been installed, I believe, in the late 90s, and were in need of some repositioning, some rehab work, general handyman work. So they were cleaned up, reinstalled in proper places in consultation with IDNR. You want to fix it?
No? Okay. We also had an Eagle Scout project last year that built us 6 more. So those were switched out just recently. So we have new ones, we took out the old ones, put in the new ones. And we're also working with the Lake County Audubon Society on this, so we track it for them.
So it's
So the-
monitored.
Yeah, it's the reason I asked that question, just that the board tonight on the regular agenda is the proclamation about migratory birds, and that's included in the packet. At the last week's SEC meeting, there was a strong desire by the SEC. They voiced that they wanted the village to, just like we're a Tree City USA, to pursue a Bird City Illinois designation. And so these types of things with the habitats that the village has, like the preserve, and with projects like this, the application requirements, I think the village could, with a limited effort, demonstrate that we could satisfy all and more of their requirements and become I think there's only 4 cities in Lake County that have that designation, so I think that's right.
Yeah,
So,
to my knowledge. I'll also make note that one of our other projects, although it is Park District property, the Carolyn Getz Wetlands, we're investing a lot of time in accordance with a grant over there to do some restoration for migratory waterfowl. So if there's an interest in that, there are certainly a number of Park District, Village, specifically Lobola managed properties that have that as a primary focus over the course of the next, I would say, 24 months.
one of the things with the requirements is that the village already has on the books, I think it goes back to 1988, that the village has a requirement, like if you have a cat, technically they're supposed to have a bell on their necks to warn birds. And that's the way the ordinance reads.
That is adorable.
So,
We need to enforce that. We need more cats with bells on them. Anywho, yeah, any questions as long as I'm taking a breather here? Okay. Skokie River and Water Reserve. So 2022, $69,000 for invasive species removal and habitat restoration, with the idea that we will take this river and water reserve, and then over the course of hopefully next year or two, maybe, possibly, getting nature preserve status, which is the highest classification for a natural area in Illinois we could achieve. We're well on our way, and this helps a lot. And I will note that we do have breaking news on this front. We have successfully gone through the invasive species removal portion of this, but as of 10 o'clock today, we were awarded another grant opportunity, I will say in the neighborhood of $32,000 more for vegetation replacement at this preserve. So we will be working on that grant as well over the course of the next 12 months. Anything
Nice.
to note about that?
We'll need volunteers.
We will need
We
volunteers.
have to earn this money through volunteers and donations. So we have to earn this grant. It's a little different. There's no matching funds. There's,
sweat equity.
it's volunteer hours, social
Yeah.
media hours, and then, we can raise up to $7,000 in new donation money, and they match that 3 to 1.
Wow.
So every $1, we get 3.
Is there a
from-
cap?
That we can
At
only raise up to
21.
7,000, and this is Illinois Clean Energy.
So one of the things we did, a lot of positive feedback on this project. What little negative feedback we received was not having funding for revegetation. That has been secured. So that problem is done moving forward. Now we just got to do the groundwork. And this all began as of February 2023, so very recent. Primarily removing what we lovingly called the wall, which was a buffer of buckthorn and, quite frankly, garbage between the preserve and the residences along McLaren Lane. That has since been removed. Next slide, please. Thank you to Tallgrass Restoration, who not only removed the vegetation, but also ran prescribed burns throughout February, so it was a very dramatic change very quickly. You can see 12 months ago, you would not be able to see that house in the background. It's now there, so all of these homeowners now have 20-something acres of backyard, which I would pay big money for. This is the before and after, so a thicket of buckthorn becomes nice open prairie, soon to be a prairie savanna hybrid of sorts as we get feedback from residents. Yes?
I was just going to ask, have you gotten any feedback from residents?
3 residents came back saying they absolutely love it and actually asked us why we didn't clear more, because they were referring to, next slide, I'll get that in a second, leave it here for now, please.
Sorry.
Thank you. 2 residents, one of which came back from Tampa after the work had been completed and didn't get our notices that we told them. They got one, they didn't get the second one. So they didn't get the full breadth of what the project was. So we've been working with them, and I think they've at least softened a little bit in the past couple of weeks.
But most of the work was, please keep going on my property,
Yes.
right? Keep moving on private property.
There
Yeah.
was that. I mean, they said, yes, you've removed all this. No, I'm not happy. Could you remove more? So it was a very mixed message. So while that is happening, everything in orange is done with this contract. Everything in red is being done by Lobola and Lobola volunteers. We just had the Fox Nation out this past weekend for Earth Day to remove buckthorn and replant flood-tolerant species along the Skokie Creek ditch, whatever you want to call it. We've had Rotary in there in the past 24 months working, Lions Club, so a lot of work happening at this preserve. High school every month. Next slide, Drew. Our Equinox bonfire was mostly getting rid of a lot of that debris that we had dug up, and a little bit of a, hey, look at everything that's happened. Wonderful event, good turnout, great volunteers, can't thank them enough. Next slide. This is the new trail we mentioned, so there are remnants of when this was subdivided and intended to be built. So we took advantage of some of the old sidewalks that remain, and we want to do is develop this into a new trail. My pie in the sky hope is that we can build an overlook platform akin to what you see like at Middle Fork Savannah, so that in time you'll have this view above all the tall grass and you'll be able to see the birds, the butterflies, the bees, the everything that you can't necessarily get from ground level, but a couple feet in the air, you'll get just a wonderful view. Another summary, I pretty much covered all that, so we can move on to the next one. So when that homeowner approached us and said, hey, you missed a spot, what they were talking about were all these little dead-end rights-of-way that are technically village property, but not within the scope of the preserve, so they wouldn't be covered by the grant. So 3 of these homeowners asked us to, hey, can you clear all of these so we can have this open too? That's up for basically the village to decide whether or not they want to move forward with that, but it's not technically within the preserve, so we couldn't technically do it. Anything to add to that? Okay. Ravine Preserve, next. So Earth Day 2022, we had 50-some volunteers in there doing cleanup, debris that was blocking the channel, causing stormwater to back up, removing invasive species. This included residents, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Indian guides and princesses, and Mariani had 25 employees do a day of service with us. So shout out and thank you to all of them. It was a wonderful day. The whole intent there is to address some really deep-rooted erosion issues caused by a prevalence of Norway maple in that ravine, kind of choking out all of our natives and leading to some really nasty erosion and dieback of native vegetation. We're seeking other grant opportunities to support that, and actually we've got a meeting with both LaFolla, Lake County Forest Preserve, and a couple other entities on the 8th to discuss some possible avenues of funding through the Urban Community Forestry Grant Program. A couple lovely shots. It is astonishing how you have a puddle and kids will go right into it. So if you just provide the opportunity, there's a stick in there, they'll go get it. It's great. So the biggest follow-up with that is one thing we do see on the village side is we do see a lot of dumping of yard waste in there, and that's something that really would go above and beyond to help curtail some of these problems, in addition to all the restoration work we need to do. That is, whether that's through education or what, something needs to be done to tell people, hey, yes, it's a natural area, but it's not a repository for leaf debris, for example.
We found a memorial for a dog that was buried there just within the last 2 months.
Oh.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So going back to, 2019, when we came, the landscape and identity plan, that kind of was the basis for us to proceed with work on 176. You can go next. This might all be familiar to you all, but this is kind of our playbook for what we've done along the 176 corridor. The whole stretch was cleared in fall of 2020? I don't know, it's on the next slide, so we'll, okay, maybe it's the slide after that. But in 2021, we did get the ComEd Green Regent Grant, and that was to remove all of the buckthorn along the 176 corridor north side and replace it with native vegetation. Phase 1 of that was done winter, spring 2022 with Pizzo and Associates. Thank you to Drew for all of the back and forth and getting us to administer that. And then monitored by Lobola and Pizzo over the course of the entire 22 season. Summer, we hosted a pair of planting events in June and September, 2,700 native wildflowers and grass plugs, 73 native trees and shrubs have been replaced out there, and as of last week, we have a very high success rate. The deer have not got to it, not all of it, so that is a small miracle. We also did have additional vegetation that we installed up by the pool for some additional screening as per a couple requests. And then phase 3, well, here's what it looked like February of 22. Our planting day in July. Thank you to the Weiermeyer family for coming out. And then September, we had a small army out there to plant. So it was a wonderful, wonderful day. A lot of people showed up. It was great to see so much enthusiasm. And then over the fall, we did have the area seeded, so we'll see in the coming weeks what comes up. It's exciting. One thing to consider moving forward is that our current memorandum of understanding, Lobola, between us and the village covers the space between Eva Terrace and Green Bay Road along 176. It does not currently include everything west of there, so that's something that needs to be worked out over the next, well, sooner rather than later, because someone's got to manage that, I suppose. Something to consider is protection from deer and additional thinning of cottonwood that will probably work against us to getting native vegetation back into that site. Bike path prairie, significantly smaller, opposite side of 176. Again, a lot of work the past couple weeks. It is part of the thematic landscape plan to basically maintain it as prairie. So this was early February, or excuse me, March. We did hold a prescribed burn out there that was very successful. And then just this past weekend, we have a couple new trees that were planted in honor of Earth and Arbor Day. So 3 new oaks out there. That's it. Any questions, concerns, anything of the sort?
Well, first I want to say thanks, because it looks like you guys are doing a whole lot of work. We really appreciate it, and I think the community is much better off for what you're doing, so thank you. I had a question about volunteer hours for those high schoolers that are helping you. Do they get, does that go towards National Honor Society, their
Yes.
volunteer hours?
Yep.
Okay, and so they would just, how does that actually work? Do they would talk to you at the end of their volunteer time and you have a slip, or do you give them something that they can?
Usually they have a form and one of our members needs to sign off on those hours. So whether they, give us the form ahead of time or they email us after the fact, we usually take a roster of everyone that shows up and then email all the high school teachers after our day.
Okay, great, thank,
Environmental studies gives extra credit too.
okay, thank you.
You're doing an amazing amount of work for our community, and you're changing the way we perceive our community. And actually, we were putting back the community before these spaces came to Lake Bluff. A friend of mine was pointing out a few months ago that if you look at pictures from the 1920s of Lake Bluff, this is trees and prairie, and there's no bushes that end up being the buckthorn, basically. And you guys are basically putting back Lake Bluff as it was before we brought these spaces for hedges and all that. And so I can only thank you for that. It's actually how Lake Bluff should be, back to its origin. And you're doing an amazing amount of work for people to enjoy the outdoor and being able to walk through the Skokie Preserve and other places in Lake Bluff. And I really love the ravine on the East Sheridan Place. That place is amazing. I mean, my kids basically learn. I grew up in the country. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. But my kids discover the middle of nowhere along that ravine. So I can only be grateful. So thank you.
We're happy to do it. We're all volunteers, so it is our passion. We would be doing it regardless whether we got the praise or not, but it's just nice to hear a thank you every once in a while, so thank you for that.
we really appreciate.
That's it.
I had a
Oh.
question about when you have your next event where you're inviting the public and volunteers, I'm assuming that the village, like the newsletter might mention something about that, or?
Certainly can.
Yeah, I think that might be helpful. Just kind of one more avenue for putting it in front of the public.
I see that you have about 600, 700 of hours of volunteer work. So that outreach in the village letter could really help you.
It most certainly could. If you go to the next slide, there is one final slide. So our work days, we just this year, not last year, started doing weekday work days because we did have certain people that could not show up for weekends, whether it be kids that had soccer practice or Lord knows what. So Michelle runs stewardship work days, weekdays, usually in the mornings. And then more often than not, it's Sundays, 9 to noon, pretty much every weekend. Are our regular events. Those are posted on our website, on a Google Calendar. We would be happy if it got picked up by, the village and park district and disseminated. We certainly could use the help, especially since some of these grants require us to invest a certain number of hours to get the funding that we're looking for. It also notes that we have a stewardship work day at the Getz. We don't have a date for that yet, but stay tuned. May 20th? May 20th.
Yeah, they break it.
So if you're interested in restoring habitat for migratory waterfowl, that is the day. And then we do have a fundraiser coming up on June 16th. I had it up there.
Okay,
I'm
I
getting
just want
there.
to make sure.
It's going to be a,
Barbecue and bluegrass on Crabtree Farm. We're gonna have two live band, we're gonna have some classical music in the beginning and then a live bluegrass band from the Chicago Old Town.
Folk school, yeah.
And that will be there, and we will specifically be asking for donations for that $7,000 to match our grant, so.
yeah.
So, we would be happy to help you with a village newsletter to reach as many people as possible. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
We know.
Thank you to Crabtree Farm for hosting us for that event. We're really excited. Silent auction, music, food, a lot of booze. At least I'm hoping. Yeah, it's going to be a blast. Everyone should come.
I just had one other question that I just thought of. So it sounds like you guys do a lot of work on public land. Do you ever help private citizens with, if they're trying to understand what kind of native species they should put in their yards? Do you have any kind of materials or any kind of information that you can share?
I have a bridge program that Susan knows about. A couple years ago, based on a book called Nature's Best Hope, I started a native garden group. It's not a club, it's not an association, it's just passionate people who want to learn about native plants. And we do book clubs, we do a lot of book clubs, 2 or 3 a year. And this year we're at the library, so May 7th, we'll be at the library from 2 to 3 o'clock. It's open to anybody in the village. And we've got about 120 people on the list. So a lot of people in Lake Bluff that are interested in native plants. And so that's kind of the bridge. We have a lot of people that are learning about native plants, that do native plants, and we know a lot about the resources for homeowners, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
2
that's
weeks
great.
ago, the library hosted a Q&A session with arborists. Maddie from the village was kind enough to join us. I'm actually the village forester for Highland Park, so I was there kind of in my dual role, representing Highland Park, trees, and then natural areas. And then Miriam Kaufman from Oak Leaf Tree Works. We were doing a Q&A panel for residents. Packed house, probably needed more space, but
Okay.
hope that answers the question.
It does, thank you.
So, too many people. That's a good problem to have.
It's a good problem.
Thank you very much, Ben. And
Thank you for your
Michelle and
time.
Sue, okay? At this point, I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Thank you. A second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we're adjourned. Thank you very much.